Hey guys!
Welcome to Bookish Banter. Today we're talking about Howl's Moving Castle.
So you may be asking yourself, what is a book channel talking about a Studio Ghibli movie? Well, what if I told you one of those movies was based on a book? Yeah, I know.
I love that movie.
I know. I also love that movie. There was a time in my life when I'll just say that I was very low and
Going through some stuff.
I was going through something. And so I would watch Studio Ghibli's Howl's Moving Castle almost every day for about a 3-month span.
Well, whenever we went to a bookstore and discovered that there is a book that it's based on, you could say we were a little excited.
A lot excited.
It was an impulse buy.
Yeah, definitely one of my favorite impulse buys. And it is such an easy read because it is for a younger audience, but it's definitely more mature than the average YA novel. And so it really appealed to me.
It's definitely a YA book, but it's got lovely prose. It's a fun little fantasy story that kind of just takes you through the same stuff that the movie does if you're already a fan.
Yeah, speaking of the movie, it may be kind of disjointed and confusing for those of you who have not read the book, but after reading the book, you can totally see where they drew their inspiration from.
Us having watched the movie 10 to 20 times, it still doesn't make a lot of sense whenever you're just watching the movie, but as soon as you read the book, it completely opens your mind to like every single thing that they make a decision on, even if like it doesn't perfectly line up with it. There's a reason why they decided to do something. And that was kind of the funnest part of the book.
For those of you who are not familiar with the Studio Ghibli film, it goes as follows. Our main character, Sophie, is the eldest of 3 daughters, and in this world, this means that she is destined to lead the least fortunate and most mundane lives of the 3. She is soon turned into an old lady by the antagonist of the story, the Witch of the Waste, which leads Sophie to leave her mundane lifestyle as a hat maker in order for her to seek her fortune. In this adventure, she seeks someone who can undo the curse that was put upon her, leading her to take refuge in the moving castle owned by a renowned wizard by the name of Howl. Howl, though famous, is most often known for his quality of stealing and eating young women's hearts. This humble beginning leads Sophie to a wild adventure that she never could have prepared for. Alright, so let's start with what we liked about the story.
To start, I love the characters, and they're the exact same characters as you find in the film, and I fell in love with them then, and I still love them here.
The pure fantasy of it. There's magic, there's spells, there's curses, there's creatures, there's golems, there's a multitude of things that are found in fantasy, and we can find them right here in Howl's Moving Castle at a deeper level than you can in the movie. So, spoilers, in case you want to actually read this book and not have it spoiled for you, we are going to be talking about the entire book.
Totally, and I think one example of that really speaks to that is the curse that was put on Howl by the Witch of the Waste, that these absurd things have to happen to him. Like, I kind of think about, like, with the mermaids. Like, in this world, like, yeah, some mermaids just washed up on the beach to satisfy the requirements of that spell. It has a really unique, soft magic system that pretty much anything can happen, and it's really fun because of it.
Speaking of a soft magic system, what did you think of Sophie's powers?
I loved them. I think it played into her character perfectly, from her being a hat maker and a good hat maker because of it. I feel like it plays a role in her entire purpose in the whole story, obviously at the end with Calcifer.
Yeah, and I think that it makes the movie make more sense, because why couldn't Howl have just spoken life into Calcifer? And it's like, well, that's not his magic subset. That's Sophie's.
I agree. It also explains to why Hal made the deal in the first place, because he did it entirely just to save Calcifer.
This book was written by a woman, Diana Wynne Jones. So 2 of the main characters, the Witch of the Waste and Sophie, are women, and they're also some of the most powerful characters. Do you believe that the book being written by a woman plays a role into why this happens?
I would say so, especially with Sophie, how unknowingly powerful she is. And throughout the whole book, we talk about how powerful Howl is, that he's an absolute prodigy, and that he's better than the wizard Solomon himself. He's better than everybody. But without training, Sophie is able to do things that nobody else was able to do. It is applicable that she did make such strong female characters.
And that's why it's important to give voice to female authors so that they can, in these fantasy realms, give a strong voice to strong women characters. Because you don't see that a lot in classic fantasy. Because the first thing that I think of in classic fantasy of a woman is Lord of the Rings, and I think of like how soft-spoken, like, what's her name, Eowyn is, and how she stands to the side most of the time until the very right time, and then she can finally stand up and be strong. Throughout this entire novel, Sophie is strong-minded, stubborn, I would even say like pig-headed at times, but she's allowed to have these flaws, and that allows for a more personal and realistic personality in a character. So Howl, which is the namesake of the novel, is quite misunderstood throughout most of it. Would you agree?
This is something that we talked about while I was reading it. Because you obviously read it before I did. And I think you had the preconceived notion that Howl was going to be such a bad guy, and you kind of carried that opinion of him throughout the whole book. Whenever you told me that before, I was reading the whole book and I was like, he seems like he's just got a bad rap and he's really a terrific guy. And I think about that with like, that the people of Port Haven would come to his door and they wouldn't even have the money for the spells he was giving them. And he would give them away anyway. And Michael had to give him a hard time about it, but Hal would just distract him. He would slither out of it as he always does. I think his worst qualities is that he's dishonest.
Yeah.
He's a coward. And he admits that.
Is that a bad trait, though? Or are we not all cowards?
In media, it is often believed to be a bad thing if you're a coward. I feel like it's a more realistic character that is to have cowardice instead of blindly courageous.
Yeah, because blind courage is stupidity. It is. And
Very Gryffindor.
yeah. It's okay, he's a Gryffindor. Don't be mad, don't be mad. But, yeah, I think that was a very realistic flaw to give to Hal, would be to be a coward and to care about his family and his found family and his original family.
I really loved his cowardice in it. I think about how at the end of it, after he did save Prince Justin, that she was like, oh, you intended on doing that the whole time, didn't you? And he was like, no, I just had to keep telling myself that I wasn't going to do it because I was so scared that I actually was going to.
Like, he had such a good, like, moral compass that he was like, oh, I should do this, I should do this, I should do this, but he was just so scared the whole time that he couldn't do it until he did it.
Yeah.
Which I totally get that. It's kind of like bungee jumping, where it's like you get to the edge and you're like, oh, I'm not actually going to do this.
Yeah.
And then it's time to do it and you're like, all right, let's just do this. And then you do it.
Like, he's such a wonderful character in it. Like, he's, I dare say, too perfect.
Yeah, but I would actually compare the way that Hal is depicted to how often in fantasy women are depicted as this perfect, pure damsel.
I thought of that too. Yeah.
You thought that? You saw the mirror?
I very much did. I thought how normally in a lot of traditional media is the woman the perfect one that is exactly what you want of a woman or whatever it is. Hal was exactly what the story needed him to be.
Mm-hmm.
And the flaws are, again, more in the main character, which was Sophie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, usually only the men are awarded flaws because they're seen as human. But in this, because it was written by a woman, the women were able to have flaws as well. It's actually quite interesting because this is a simple children's book, and yet you can see how it being written by a woman, it was influenced to be more nuanced about the feminist perspective. Howl is just such a lovely character. I really enjoyed it. At first, I was totally on Sophie's side, where I was like, oh, he's such a, what's even the word? Like a philanderer. Like
Dirtbag.
He's a dirtbag, yeah. But then, like, you find out, like, you see what he does, and he's such a good, honest person. A little less honest, but when I say honest, I mean he's kind.
I feel like Sophie's assumptions of Howl are kind of what lead you to think that.
I completely agree, and it is written for you to think that. And I think it's because we're supposed to take Sophie's point of view, and Sophie's point of view is what I almost said Markle, what Michael spreads about Howl.
Yeah. That she had this preconceived notion that, one, he actually does eat women,
Mm-hmm.
and two, that if he wasn't doing that, he's still a
Playboy.
Mm-hmm. Which in the end, you figure out he's neither.
Mm-hmm.
One other thought on that is, man, is he so willing to put up with Sophie's crap?
Oh, I love it. I love it because, like, the whole time, like, he's not even really sure that she's the beautiful girl from the market that he saw the other day. Like, no, he's just putting up with this old woman that came into his home and was like, this place is a mess. And just started cleaning everything.
I think it's so cute how Michael, he was obviously adopted by Hal,
Mm-hmm.
but not really specifically adopted. Hal just is such a nice guy that he, like, let him stay.
Mm-hmm.
And, like, Michael said he never even knew whenever he was allowed to stay. He just never got kicked out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it sounds like Hal's lucky that his family isn't even bigger, because he'll just adopt anybody into his family as long as they're nice. Yeah, I definitely I thought it was really cute in this book how they portrayed the bond between Calcifer and Hal. They clearly care for each other. And it's a lot more nuanced than in the movie. Not to strictly compare it, but in the movie, it's kind of like Calcifer's always complaining about how he works him to death, over and over and over again. And then you never see the soft side. But in the book, you can see, like, Calcifer is genuinely thankful to Hal for the sacrifice that he gave to him.
Yeah, that was totally, like, a little bit of character assassination on the part of the Studio Ghibli movie with Calcifer, because I feel like they only kept the quirky little goofy parts of him instead of the scary parts, the sweet parts, every bit of him. Like, in the beginning, whenever they were describing Calcifer, he was a lot more intimidating than you get from the Billy Crystal goofy little bubbly flame Calcifer that you get in the movie. And then he softens up over time, and then he has strong feelings. He's flawed. He's cares about everybody there. He likes their attention. He's really a part of the family.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and if you're a fan of found family, this book is for you, because it is clearly all about found family, and that is such a great trope. I think it's so cute. It's perfect. I love it. Okay, so onward to what we didn't really like. I made a list, which doesn't mean that there was a lot to hate. It just means that there was some very specific things where I was like, that was kind of weird. But so I would say maybe the last 2 chapters, but especially the last chapter, is an absolute whirlwind, which some people would love. Some people love that. I personally didn't absolutely adore that. What did you think about that?
That was something that I specifically thought of whenever I was reading it, that I was thinking that, man, I'm going to have to reread these.
Mm-hmm.
Because one, whenever the whole family is coming into the house and you're getting crossed with all those different things going on, you're like, wait, what's tracking? What's going on right now? And you follow, but like you do skip a lot of the details because of it. And it is a little less than fun to read.
Mm-hmm.
But like you said, especially with the last chapter, there's a lot going on. It feels like she was like, oh wow, I have a lot of things to finish up here, and I'm only doing one more chapter. I feel like there was a lot of build up with the general impressions of the Witch of the Waste, or the curse that was put on Howl by the Witch of the Waste, and it just fell flat. It didn't have a lot of payoff.
It was building up this whole huge battle between Sophie and the Witch of the Waste, and then it's just like, oh, it's over really, really quick. Which I would prefer over a overly dragged out, like, violent action sequence, but there's a in between.
The one action sequence they had whenever it was at Port Haven, like the harbor or whatever, that was enough for me. I didn't need any more. That single battle kind of felt meaningless, and there was no more payoff afterwards.
Yeah, because it was really intense, because it is around a 430-page book, correct? So it's around 400 pages, and all of this is happening in the last chapter or two. I found it a little absurd. It felt like a little sloppy. The writing was a little sloppy in the very end, which is hard to say for me personally, because the writing is absolutely beautiful throughout the novel, and the pacing is so well done, which is why it was very startling for me at the very end whenever all these things pop up, and then she's like, oh, well, I gotta fix all this right now.
I totally agree, and like you said, I loved the writing. I thought it was really well done. I thought it was beautiful, but definitely rushed at the end. And this is a one later on your list, but the whole little goofy chapter with the 7 league boots. I could have probably omitted that to be able to save some pages for some of those deeper concepts later. Oh, if, Howl and Sophie weren't too busy looking into each other's eyes, then they'd been able to see what's going on. I don't know.
Yeah, and I thought it was especially funny that it became all of a sudden very soppy at the end, where they're staring into each other's eyes, and then they're just like, I can't focus on anything other than you, and it's just like, you've been living together for months now, like, you kind of hated each other for a while, so I don't know, like, it's kind of silly how soppy all of a sudden it became.
It just took Howl seeing that she was not old.
That she was a baddie.
Yeah.
To be fair, he did get his heart back. So speaking about the 7 leagues boot scene, that's a specific point that I made. I thought it was kind of silly. The 7 league boots, if you are unaware what they are, they're an invention of Howl's for the military. You put them on, you take a big step, and you are 7 leagues away. It's pretty self-explanatory. So at some point, Michael and Sophie both use them to get to Letty, I believe. And obviously the obvious happens. Sophie is not very experienced with them, so she takes a couple steps, and then she gets off balance, and then she's all over the place, and I was just like, oh, this feels a little below our reading level. And I'm not saying our reading level, I mean towards the targeted audience, which is, you gotta think the main character's 18, so you gotta think that the targeted audience is probably like 15 to 18, 14 to 18, something like that. And I felt like that trope was so below that reading level.
It is very specifically a YA book. And whenever we got to the 7 league boots, I was really hoping they wouldn't have some kind of goofy, oh, she kept on tripping and going through it, and she just can't stop. I was really hoping that wouldn't happen, and exactly what I expected did happen. And like you said, it feels like a kid book for that chapter, and it's the outlier of it. Like, for a YA book, I really feel like it shoots above its class that with the quality of writing, but with that one, it completely takes it down to, like, childhood writing.
I completely agree. Yeah, but it was very short, so it was over very quickly, so I can't complain too much about it. It was just a fleeting moment of immaturity where I was just like, oh wow, that feels out of place. And then finally, if that's all you have to say on that, my final point about things I did not like about this book was the overly complex identity switch plot with her sisters, Letty and Martha.
So it was really just kind of an unnecessary plot point for them to have to do the switch. Like, it was just kind of a waste. Like, it didn't amount to anything. Like, it didn't have any value later on. The only times that they brought it up afterwards was whenever she met Fanny again. She was like, huh, those silly kids. And then whenever she first talked to Miss Fairfax, she was like, oh yeah, I knew immediately. Like, how would I have not noticed my own spells? It was just kind of unneeded and over complex.
It was. They quite literally could have just been like, hey, can we switch places? And everyone would have been like, yes, it is totally fine.
Everyone was fine with it. Nobody cared.
Everyone knew it in the end, and they were all like, oh, that's so silly.
And it even kind of created a little bit of a plot hole because with Michael, how he grew to know Letty.
Martha as Letty.
He was even calling her Letty at the beginning.
I don't know. It was just confusing, and it's for a younger audience, so I don't know. It felt unnecessary. It was overly confusing. It was overly complex. It was just not necessary.
And it just wasn't really that fun.
It wasn't fun. So we said what we liked. We said what we didn't like, which was a much shorter list than what we liked, obviously. So I bet you're wondering, do we recommend that you read it? The short answer, yes. Please read this book. It is so good. The long answer, yes. Read this book. It is so good.
Yes, this book is so good. Read it. Maybe skip the 7 League Boots chapter, but it even was applicable. So, like, whatever. There's a couple pages of goofiness, but I mean, as long as you're willing to put up with a little bit of goofiness here and there, which is totally the fun in, like, you know, a fantasy YA kind of book. Like, you know, like, and it was well written enough to be able to pay off, and it, like, you don't feel stupid from reading it. So yes, it's fantastic. It was super fun. It was a quick read. There was nothing hard. You're not going to be digging through your dictionary for specific words or anything. It's nothing hard, but it's not a challenge to read. But it's just a delight. And if you liked the movie, it is the exact vibe. Like we said, completely different story, so just think of it like of a different episode or something. But it's the complete same vibe, same characters, same fun energy.
And what's even better is, like what he said, it's literally like another episode of the same series of the movie. So if you feel like you need even more than just this book, it's actually a trilogy. So there's 2 more books that we have not read, but it's just more adventures of Sophie and Howl in their moving castle, making their way through life. We started and restarted the movie multiple times while we were both reading this because it reminded us so much of the movie. It was amazing. It felt so cozy and fantastical and so fun. I would highly recommend this to any reader, young and old alike. It is definitely worth your time, just a few hours even.
Well, I hope you guys enjoyed our discussion on Howl's Moving Castle, the book. If you did, please hit us with a like, comment, and subscribe if you really liked it. We will be coming out with more content like this, whether it's Howl's Moving Castle or some other book that we're going into. So we would totally appreciate some more attention because we do put a lot of effort into these videos. Do you have anything else?
Please read this book. It is so good. I know I say that about so many books, but it's so fun. If you want to relive your glory days as a child reading fantasy for the first time, read this book. It is so good. And it doesn't have any seriously heavy themes, so if you want a feel-good book, this is your book.
That's a good way to put it, is that, like, it's like chasing that fantasy, those fantasy feelings that you had for books as a kid, but it's actually well written.
It is well written enough to hold up as an adult. All right, I think that's it for today.
Thanks.
Bye.